Live from the SABC headquarters in Auckland Park, a very good evening to you and welcome to our Thursday edition of the Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvogo. Now, all eyes are on President Cyril Ramaphosa this evening ahead of the announcement of a cabinet reshuffle. We'll bring it to you live here on the Watchdog. But before we bring you the build-up to that announcement, let's talk a little about the story that until about 2 hours ago was the one going to dominate this evening's program. And that's the story of the continued use of pit latrines in South African schools, which will once again come under the spotlight tomorrow. 6 years after Advocacy Group Section 27 instituted legal proceedings against both the National and Limpopo Provincial Departments of Education for the removal of all pit toilets at schools, the court has finally agreed to hear the matter. Limpopo pupil Michael Komapi was 5 years old when he died in 2018. Lister Magongwa was 7 when he too met his untimely death in 2013. Several other children got injured, while some were humiliated and scarred, like the Eastern Cape boy who was forced by his principal, Lubeko Mgandela, to stand knee-deep in human waste in front of other children, using his hands to search for the teacher's cell phone. Section 27 and Equal Education take us through the history of their landmark case and what they are asking the courts to do now. Also joining us this evening will be the National Department of Basic Education to tell us why they still haven't done what they promised to do years ago. The Watchdog starts now. Now, yesterday, in preparation for tonight's show, I visited a Johannesburg-based artist who says every South African should be incensed at the indignity and suffering some of our young compatriots continue to endure 27 years into freedom. World-renowned contemporary painter Mbongeni Buthelezi has decided to play his part and is asking each and every one of us to do the same. From this amorphous heap of rubbish, Mbongeni Buthelezi sifts out all the alcohol and soft drinks plastic wrappers everyone else throws away and melts the waste material into beautiful art. His weapon of mass construction, an industrial hit gun. He has traveled the world showcasing the beauty of his skill and earning a living from it while playing his part towards creating a better and cleaner earth. His latest and still unfinished project, though, is one of hell on earth. The plight of South African children who still have to endure the indignity of using pit latrines.
I was actually inspired by this story, that I saw in the media. I didn't know how to respond at first, but I knew that, it's something that shouldn't have happened. As an artist, as someone who is supposed to reflect on what is happening in the society, I took it upon myself to do something out of this story. A heartbreaking story, painful story. As a parent myself, I just couldn't sit and fold my arms and say, let it go, just like any other stories. Few months later, after I saw this story, I started to conceptualize, to see how one, could possibly take this story forward. Take the story forward in the sense that, I wanted more people to know about this. Because at the end of the day, the boy Michael Komapi, who died in that horrible manner, I was starting to wonder how many more Michaels, out there that we might not know of. How many more parents who are crying today because of a similar story that happened to Michael. So I started, putting things together, and see how one could really make a story out of this. Because as an artist, I also regard myself as a storyteller, I am one artist that believes in telling stories that come from the society where I'm coming from. I'm also a rural boy, I was born in the rural setup. Later on came to the city, So that combination for me, the rural upbringing and the urban life that I tasted when I was 18 years old, I think it makes me fully understand exactly what happened, in this particular story of Michael. And this is how it all started. And I'm hoping that, with time, people will be able to really start talking about this, because this is the whole idea. The idea for me is to bring it up and make people talk about these things that are still haunting us, 30 years in our new democracy.
Explain to us your choice of materials, corrugated iron sheets and toilet seats.
For me, the materials are very important. With the corrugated iron symbolizing, the toilet itself, half-built toilet. The toilet seat, it actually tells the story of the toilet. And if you actually look at these panels, what I've done also, I have used portraits of different children, not necessarily for Michael. I used 6 toilet seats on one panel. And I'm planning to have 10 of these panels to make up 60 of the artworks that are going to be part of this installation. The reason for that is actually very simple. I mean, the boy was 6 years old. The boy could have lived his life until he was 60. This is just my way of trying to project, the possibility, of how Michael could have lived his life. And at the bottom of that, I've got black portraits. And those black portraits are also part of the installation simply because they symbolize other Michaels out there that you might not know of now. And I'm pretty sure, there are many more other Michaels, that we will never hear about, which is something that literally kills me, as a parent, as a citizen, to see that, I think responsibility was lost somewhere by someone, and as an artist, I don't actually bring answers, but I ask questions, and I also try to make people discuss certain issues that I think, need to be discussed, by the citizens.
All to get his compatriots to play our part at school, at work, in township social settings, even behind the gates of suburbia. Everywhere. Vuyo Mvoko, Johannesburg. Well, let's talk now to some of the people who have taken this matter to court, albeit 6 years after they started initiating or instituting legal proceedings against both the National and the Limpopo Provincial Departments of Education. They're asking for the removal of all pit toilets at schools, and the court is going to hear this matter tomorrow. Let's bring in now Faranaz Verava, who is from Section 27. Also bringing in Tebucho Tsasane, who is from Equal Education. Elijah Mhlanga is with the National Department of Education. Thanks to all of you for agreeing to come through, albeit it's going to be a lot shorter than I thought it would be because of, I'm sure you know that the President will be addressing the nation pretty soon. I'm going to start with you, Faranaz, if I may, for a brief history to this issue.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Vuyo. Thank you for having me on your show. As you know, Michael died in the early part of 2014 when he fell down the toilet. and nobody could find him. And eventually his mother found him with his hand sticking out of the toilet. It took us a few years to get the case into court and to get judgment in that case. There were two parts to the judgment that was handed down. The first part dealt with the damages for Michael Komape's family because of the loss of Michael. The second part was a structural order directed to the National Department of Education and to the Limpopo Department of Education. And what was required was that they do an audit of all the pit toilets in the Limpopo province, and then they develop a plan to get rid of all those toilets. And that is why we are going back to court tomorrow. We are going back for the structural order. And what we are arguing is that the plan that the government has put forward, for us, it is basically a shambolic plan that's jumbled together. It's lists and diagrams, but you know, in constitutional law, when we're talking about socioeconomic rights, we talk about having a comprehensive and coherent plan. This plan is far from comprehensive and coherent. Firstly, it doesn't give you clearly the number of pit toilets across Limpopo. Now, you know, there are different data sets from within the Department of Education relating to pit toilets, and all these numbers basically contradict each other as to how many pit toilets. So pit toilets in the province, depending on what data set you could be looking at, could be anywhere between 2,000 to 3,000. And this is very important because if you don't know the number of pit toilets, you can't fix the problem. Then the other problem is there's no budget for the fixing of the toilets. Then another problem we have is that we know of schools that are our client schools that are not on the list provided by the department. So we are saying that before another Michael Komape or Lumka Maketwa dies, what we need is a proper, coherent and comprehensive and constitutional plan. And that is why we are going back to court tomorrow. I see Elijah is here today, and I'm sure Elijah is going to talk about SAFE and what's happening under SAFE. But SAFE, I want to say, is just one part of the story. And to also say that SAFE was only initiated after Lumka Maketwa died in 2018. And between 2018 and 2021, we have repeatedly asked certain questions around the SAFE initiative, like how does it fit in with the Limpopo plan that government has required? How does it relate to other infrastructure projects? How is it going to be funded? None of those questions were answered until today, very conveniently, when the department put out a statement giving the most clear plan I've ever seen on SAFE. But SAFE speaks to 387 schools with pit toilets in the Limpopo province. What we are talking about here is a number we are not sure of between 2,000 and 3,000 pit toilets in the province.
Okay. Tebogo Tsana, let's bring you in here. What for you, I know you and Section 27 agree and work together on these things, but what for you has this whole saga thrown up?
Thanks, Vuyone. I think this whole thing actually caused a lot of problems, mostly for learners in rural provinces or marginalized places in the country, because it showed the incompetence of the government in making sure that the right to education is actually realized.
Okay, we seem to have an audio problem there. I don't know whether he needs to unmute himself or the problem is on our side.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now, yes. Yes, you can continue.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Vio. I was saying that it shows the incompetence of the government in ensuring that the right to education is actually realized, because sanitation, and mostly in Limpopo, is a huge issue. And from the structural order that was handed down in terms of a judgment in 2018, it meant that the Department of Education had to actually make sure that pit latrines are eradicated in the province. And per Equal Education's advocates around the minimum norms and standards that actually showed that like in terms of infrastructure, that this is how a school should look like. The deadline was last in 2020, and the department was far in terms of achieving that that deadline. So that meant that when we tried reaching out to the department, they said that they are actually going to start eradicating pit latrines in 2026. And that's absurd in reality. What are we saying about learners who are constantly going in undignified toilets, who actually do not have access to reliable water? So this means that the education department in Limpopo specifically, and the national, it's not showing any competence or any political will to ensure that a constitutional obligation in terms of providing the right to education is actually provided to learners. And from testimonials that we actually receive from equal education members on the ground, it shows that the department, both national and provincial, has a problem in terms of the data that they actually they actually have on their disposals, because the department constantly gives inaccurate data in terms of pit latrines in the province, in terms of schools that do not have pit latrines, in terms of schools that do have water and schools that do not actually have water in the province. And that's problematic for a whole provincial department and a national department, because if it means that this is in a provincial department, it actually states that the national department it's not doing enough to ensure that it's actually the provincial department meets its actual mandate. And it's quite shocking to know that the Department of Education in Limpopo underspends its infrastructure budget, but yet fails to actually eradicate pit latrines in the province and provide proper sanitation facilities for learners in the province. So I think maybe Mr. Mhlanga can tell us more about what's happening. Why is the department giving us inaccurate data? Why is the department actually failing to meet its obligations?
Okay, let's bring you in then, Mr. Mhlanga. Let's talk first about the scale of the problem. Does the National Department have a finger on it? Do you know exactly, the nature and the extent of the problem?
Good evening, Vuyo. Yes, we do. We do, because in those schools there are learners, there are teachers that we pay every month. But we also know, because the Director General has been to all those places. He continues to do so. Even as I speak to you, he's in Limpopo. He spent the day yesterday in the Vembe and Mopane areas. Today he was in the Sikukune area. And if you check the department's media platforms, we show images of these places, places that have been counted, places where implementing agents have been sent to, they have been deployed there, and they are busy building these structures, which we have been sharing since March this year, almost every day, as evidence of the work that is being done on the ground. So you cannot have that type of image bank if those places do not exist and if you do not know where they are. So we do.
Okay, does it follow automatically then that you've actually budgeted for everything that you're about or that needs to be done?
Yeah, the money is there, the money is being used. The implementing agents who are doing the work, the structures that are going up that we've been sharing with South Africans are being paid for from different grants that are aimed at ensuring that infrastructure in school is provided for, whether it's the backlog infrastructure grant or the equitable infrastructure, equitable share. The monies will come, and in some instances it gets reprioritized so that we are able to meet the demands that are there. except that you don't have the time because you have a financial year within which you need to do a certain amount of work. We have an annual performance plan which indicates how many we need to have done, and we continue to do that. So a lot of work is actually underway. In the media statement which we shared today, we do indicate some of the structures that are being, the type of structures that are being built, and on every other day, really, on our platforms, we've been sharing to show that these structures are those that have been budgeted. Of course, we have additional material that is being donated by private companies, and we are thankful for that. Their involvement is also assisting in accelerating the process of eradicating pit latrines and to be replaced with appropriate infrastructure for our schools.
Have you been able to share this information with your stakeholders, among them the organizations that our two other guests represent, which is Equal Education and Section 27?
I'm not sure if it was requested, but I'm always available to make information available. I mean, we did that today. We do that on any other day. That's what I'm saying. It's something that we have normalized in the department, that wherever the DG goes to monitor infrastructure, we do this. In fact, he has made this his priority. He goes out. Since March, he has not been in the office for more than 2 days because he has made monitoring infrastructure his priority. And the minister has also prioritized this. As I'm talking to you now, every Friday morning at 7, she wants a report. How many toilets have been replaced where, and what's the progress in all other provinces, especially those 3 provinces that are facing the most amount of challenges. So political will, yes, there's political will because the minister demands an update report every week. The DG is out there on the field. He is also held to account by the minister every week, and the DG himself holds the implementing agents to account almost every 3rd day, because we want to make this a priority, and we want to demonstrate it in action, not just plans. Information is available. We brief the portfolio committee all the time. And when we brief the portfolio committee, that information immediately becomes available. And whoever else will ask for that information, it is there for anyone to go through it. And we do so because we want to be held to account. We've got nothing to hide. It's all being done in the open.
Faranaz, I'm assuming here that what Elijah has just said will form part of their responses before court. Now, on both the scale of the problem and the budget issue that you were raising, does what he says satisfy does it speak to at least some of the issues that you're raising in your court papers?
You know, as I said, what Elijah is talking about today, very eloquently as always, is the SAFE initiative. And the SAFE initiative, like I said, is part of the story dealing with 387 schools in Limpopo. But there's more than 1,000 schools in Limpopo that he's not speaking to. And I also want to say that Elijah says we could have got the information at any time. We have asked repeatedly after the first plan was presented. We responded. We then, after a long period where we didn't get a hearing, we then put forward new information and asked the court, or asked our opponents to reply to that information that we put before the court about the improvement or the lack of improvement in pit latrines. In all that time, we never got information from the DBE. They have not filed a supplementary affidavit in court. And a lot of what came out today around the SAFE initiative, like I said, are things that we have been hearing about for the first time. Also on the budget, I have to say that one of the arguments in government's papers is very much in contradiction with what Elijah is saying today. Because one of the things that they are saying, like Tebogo mentioned, is that they have alleged that some of the toilets can only be repaired from 2026 onwards. How long after Michael's death is that? And one of the reasons they give for that is budget. So today we are hearing something very different from what they have said under oath in their court papers. So it's interesting what's being said today, and better late than ever. But yeah, it's not what we have heard up until now, and definitely not is what is under oath in the court papers from the department.
Elijah, do you want to respond directly to what the 2-3 issues that Farnaz is raising?
Well, the first one was around the data. Well, you know, there are budgets that are there for infrastructure that have always been there to eradicate inappropriate facilities in schools. And that work continues. Yes, SAFE focuses on sanitation, but there was always money before that to look generally. I mean, there's a CD and there are other projects that provincial education departments are currently busy with, and the general infrastructure provision is covered there. We can talk about that to no end, but what I'm saying is that there is definitely a number of schools that we know that need attention, and they are there. The reason the data is different, by the way, is the fact that we are closing schools that are non-viable. In fact, the Eastern Cape, for example, last week they issued a statement to say that about 1,200 schools have been closed because they are too small to be kept operational, and they're becoming too costly to the department. And those schools are almost half empty. So the data will change because we monitor every day, and there's work that is being done, and where we can't keep a school operational, we close it and merge it with another one. So that could account for the difference in data. In terms of budget, the budget is there. Your question was, is there a budget? Yes, there is a budget. Whether it's enough, that's another question. It's not enough because we know in the past 3-4 years, there's been a steady decline or cut, in fact, in the infrastructure budget. That has an impact on the work that we need to do. So we cannot say there is enough money. There's not enough money. The challenge is always bigger than the funds available. So that we are going to say, I don't think that is a contradiction in any way in what is in the court papers and what I've said here tonight, and what is in the media statement which you issued earlier today.
Teboho, I mean, is there a way, or is there a way that these matters can be handled so that everyone is able to to be on the same page? Because, I mean, if there are, I mean, the contradictions are as apparent as they are listening to all three of you this evening, then it means, or it suggests, you know, that there is no working together between the people, you know, who are supposed to run with these things, and those, of course, who have a direct interest in progress. Where do you think lies the big? Let's start with the communication problem.
Thank you. You actually highlighted the issue of communication, because it's very difficult to actually get hold of the department. We constantly send emails, we constantly send correspondence on issues that are actually arising from the ground. And at times when you request certain information, it even takes months for you to get responses from the department. And we normally get responses via PIA. We PIA information now when we need information. I think it's not a problem of equal education and Section 27 and other stakeholders, but then it's the problem in the department and the department's education department, because they do not respond to single emails. They have emails that are late there for us when we have problems to reach out to them, but then the response from them, you get it after a long time. And when we get that response, it's when the parties have agreed in going back to court, because now we see that the department is actually not responding on critical issues that on those emails or those correspondence. We are asking agent assistance in terms of that. So I think the department needs to ensure that their communication channels are clearly open, and whenever there is new developments in terms of data that is updated, let the department update data and let the public or stakeholders working in that regards know, because now some of the things that Mr. Mhlanga is talking about, it's new to us, because we never even knew that 1,000 and something schools have been closed, you understand? So I think those critical things in terms of us receiving data from the department, it's quite better for us to have information from them versus us going in the ground doing surveys now. If they have new information, let them email us. We are always available. Email data to ensure that we keep a good relationship amongst them. We are not fighting the department, but we won't stop advocating for quality education up until the right to education is realized in this country.
Mr. Mhlanga, I would imagine it's in your interest to make your equal educations and your Section 27s happy. And the sharing of information would be key to that.
Yeah, I agree, and I support what he's saying. In fact, with the previous office bearers of equal education, we used to have such engagements which were normal, were part and parcel of work that we're doing, would engage and just share information.
Until what happened?
Until they change office. I mean, they're not there for a long time. They work for a short time and then they go, and then there's a new cohort of people that come through. In my time since coming to the department, I don't know how many people I've dealt with from equal education. So it makes it very difficult to follow up on some of the long-term agreements that we need to put in place.
Faranaz, is that the problem? You guys change people ever so often, and as a result, the department is just can't keep up. Is that the state of your organizations?
Well, Section 27 is making me old. I've been there for many years now, and Elijah knows that. I can't say the same for the equalizers because they are starting out in the world. But yeah, I've been at Section 27 since 2014. But to just add that what I'd like to say is I think there is a way for us to come together. One of the things that we are asking for in court tomorrow is that we are asking that because there's been so little progress on a plan, because there is such a shoddy plan, we are asking, like the courts have done in many cases, that there be a committee formed around the rebuilding of pit toilets. Now, when Mr. Mweli goes and he's monitoring the rollout of SAFE, that is just for the SAFE initiative. But what we are saying that tomorrow we want a plan and we want a committee that is going to be able to look at that plan, look at the data. And Elijah is saying something that is not quite true, which is that a lot of the numbers are incorrect because of rationalization. We are talking about numbers across different data sets, whether it's from government's plan in the court order, whether it's the SAFE initiative, whether it's the norms and standards monitoring, or whether it's the NEEMS data. Those each say different things in the same year about how many pit toilets there are in each province. So we need to know exactly what the correct number is and how to eradicate pit toilets in every school. Not forget one school where there may be one child that falls down the toilet and destroys that family forever. The other thing we need is to have people like EE, like Section 27, and specialists in the field that can monitor the rollout of the toilets timelessly and before 2026, which will be way too late for all our learners.
Debucho, in your own defense, I mean, are you guys disorganized? You change people often, which then breaks the chain of communication between you and the department and other stakeholders?
I think from equal education side, yes, we are a growing movement. And what normally does happen is that, yes, people do change. But then what doesn't change in equal education is it's emails and its numbers. So if the Department of Education was intentional enough to ensure that they actually want to reach out to equal education with new data, that would have happened a long time ago. Even when we send emails, it states there to Mr. Mhlanga, to me, Minister Njimutsecha from Equal Education, and also has contacts and the website. So I don't think Mr. Mhlanga is correct to say Equal Education has been changing offices. Since the existence of Equal Education, mostly were in Gauteng, we only changed our office once. The office has been there since 2012. It shifted in 2019 to Boksburg. So we never changed offices regularly. We never changed our contact details regularly. So I think maybe I can even spell out Equal Education's numbers so that maybe he can write them down so that when he wants to reach out, he can do that on a later stage.
Elijah, what in a nutshell will the education authorities be putting before court tomorrow?
Our case is in the court papers. That will be dealt with in the court tomorrow. What we're talking about here is the work that the department is doing, and we don't feel that we should have been taken to court to be forced to say what we are already saying publicly every day in a normal course of business. But I guess courts are also good because they give you an opportunity to explain what you are doing without anyone interrupting you. Everyone is there for the same purpose. We are going to take advantage of that opportunity. So we will outline in court exactly what it is that the department is doing. But even outside court, we'll continue to do the work that we need to do because we believe that it's in the interest of the country for all these pit latrines to be eradicated, and we're doing that, and we'll continue to do that. And if there's a need for information, we are free to share that. I don't believe that the department is difficult.
We asked for it today and we didn't get it. And it's only a matter of a few hours before this is public knowledge.
No. Once documents are lodged in court, they become public knowledge immediately. So that could have been obtained there from the courts in any other way. I don't remember receiving a message asking for court documents, by the way.
Faranaz, what are the lessons to be learned from this episode?
From this episode and many other episodes, like the school nutrition case and many of the other cases that we have unfortunately had to go to the department, to take the department to court on, which is that our children should be prioritized. Our constitution says our children should be prioritized. Children should not go hungry. Children should not be falling down dangerous pit latrines. We need a more caring society. We need to focus on the right to basic education, which includes clean and decent sanitation. And to the extent that we take these principles in our constitution seriously, government should be doing what has to be done to fix basic education in schools. Can I also just say as a final word, if we had done that on sanitation, we wouldn't have had a situation now where money is being moved from school infrastructure to getting pit toilets, to getting mobile toilets into schools to manage the pandemic. We would have had proper and decent sanitation, and we wouldn't have been looking for temporary solutions.
Debuko, last words from you. Unmute yourself.
Thanks. I think maybe a lesson that came out of this discussion is that the government needs to actually realize the right to education. And it states in the Constitution that it's obligation to ensure that learners in the country are actually prioritized in terms of education. If we want to build a better society, if we want to build futures in this country, we should ensure that all components that are in the education sector in terms of sanitation, infrastructure, textbooks, the nutrition program are actually prioritized by the government to ensure that quality education is achieved in the country. So I think that's what I actually learned from this episode. And to also, something that also came up when Faranaz was talking right now, it's that the department rather spends money in going back to court than using that money to ensure that sanitation is actually built, infrastructure is built. I think we as Section 27 and Equal Education, we always resort last to going back to court after several engagements that we actually try having with the department. So I think that the department needs to ensure that they make sure that the right to education is realized, because it's very painful talking from a point of view of someone who was from the working class and has been under some of those conditions. So I'm talking out of experience on what actually happened. It's not that I'm talking out of saying, no, because I'm in equal education. I was once a learner. I was subjected to poor sanitation condition, at times no access to reliable water. So it's very painful talking from a point of view of a working class or a marginalized person.
Elijah?
No, I agree with him. I mean, it's a painful experience for those learners where development has not taken place, but there's an exciting experience for those learners where new buildings have come, and for those that are witnessing the building of new and appropriate toilets for our learners. So it's two worlds, one waiting and the other already experiencing the changes. So we will continue to do what we need to do. The good thing is that there are targets. We have said what is going to be done, and we'll stick to those targets. The DG is out there. He said it in his own words that he will not rest until the last put latrine has been removed from a school. So that is the work that he is committed to doing, and he's not alone in that commitment. The minister is right behind him. The MECs are right behind him. The HODs are right behind him. In every meeting that takes place, the issue of infrastructure is always there. So there is definitely commitment in the sector. Everyone is working towards ensuring that our schools restore dignity to education in general, and that our teachers and our learners actually wake up and want to go to school. They must not dread going there because of the poor infrastructure that is there. But as I said, the good part is that the work is being done, and there's evidence of that work that is being done right across. And we are not just sitting in Pretoria, but we're going around the country to make sure that indeed those contractors who have been given the work to do, they do exactly that which they need to do in terms of the specifications that have been given. Where there's poor performance, contracts are terminated, others are given warnings, because we don't want a situation where people give excuses for work that they should have done when in fact they won these tenders after promising that they had the capacity and capability to do so.
So we're going to leave it this evening. Thanks to all our three guests. Elijah Mhlanga from the National Department of Basic Education, Faranaz Verava from Section 27, and Debu Khotsasane from Equal Education. That matter of pit latrines going before court in Limpopo tomorrow. Section 27 has taken the Departments of Education to court, and the matter is going to be heard tomorrow. Now, all eyes are on President Cyril Ramaphosa this evening ahead of the announcement of a cabinet reshuffle. We'll take you live to the Union buildings where the president will be making that, announcement this evening. Up next, we start the build-up to that 9 o'clock announcement. Don't go away. Well, all eyes are on President Cyril Ramaphosa this evening ahead of the announcement of a cabinet reshuffle. A short while ago, the presidency announcing that 8:30 announcement has now been moved to 9 o'clock. Let's now start with our build-up to that announcement. I'm joined on the line by Ongama Mdimgaf. Ongama, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. Well, this matter has been with us for a while. People have been speculating. Of course, I mean, two things have actually brought that speculation to sharp focus. One is that of the health minister, who has been on leave, who was put on leave. And the other one, of course, was the death of the former minister in the presidency, Jackson Mthembu. In between, of course, there's a lot that has happened. What happened in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal, a lot of people calling for some of for the heads of some members of the executive to fall. Just your thoughts this evening, literally minutes before President Cyril Ramaphosa addresses us.
Sure. Judging by the news of the resignation of Minister of Health Zweli Mkhize, who was under suspension, I don't know whether you've been able from your end to confirm it as SABC, but it's clear that there are some there are some heads that are going to roll, and obviously by the fact that the presidency has said the meeting tonight is about making announcements around movements within the cabinet. We've been waiting for this moment for a long time, and my fear is that this may not necessarily be what we've waited for, in the sense that we may be dealing with a situation where the president is acting because of a forced hand, given the fact that there's been a public outcry about those glaring failures by the security cluster ministers, if in fact they are a consideration here, or the slow move when it comes to the fate of former Minister Zweli Mkhize. We know that the SIU report has been with the president now for quite some time.
Well, I don't know, other people have said that, perhaps the president should have made that report public, which would have which some say would have assisted him a great deal, because the fact of the matter is that while he may be dealing with what appears to be a straightforward case, the dynamics inside his political party may have made it difficult for him to arrive at a point where he has to ask him, to go.
There's a case to be made for these reports to be made public. One, because the state is not a private institution. Secondly, for that same reason that people highlight, that they help explain why certain decisions have to be taken. Obviously, part of the close management of the contents of that would be precisely that same point, that whoever is working on it, or the president himself, may not want to create pressure for themselves by availing the contents of the report in public. Obviously, there was pressure even before that report saw the light of day. We, as South Africans, are demanding a political environment in which, once people realize that they've acted in ways that are not in the best interest of the country, and they hold powerful positions, to fall on their swords immediately. But unfortunately, this is not part of the political culture that has developed in the ANC. And so that's why, for example, today we're not talking about a president who has taken a review. Well, we don't know yet, but I would be very surprised if the cabinet reshuffle is so comprehensive to the extent that it also addresses non-performance as opposed to scandal and failure, which is in the public domain.
Let's bring you in, Professor Mcebisi Ndletyana. Foremost, in your mind now, literally, 10 minutes before the president addresses us?
Well, The reshuffle obviously is the topical issue. And we always get excited when we have news of this reshuffle, especially now. But sometimes I think, and most of the time, we have gotten disappointed because the reshuffle has a lot of things to consider. The tradition really of selection into cabinet in this country has been about seniority. So you get all sorts of mediocre people simply because they happen to be senior. And it is this balancing act.
Okay. Okay, we seem to have a problem with Professor Ndlejana's line. I think we may have to.
So for me, really sad because I think entirely your process.
Professor Ndlejana, we're going to have to drop your line and redial you again. In the meantime, let me bring you back, Ongama. Just why is it one would always assume that when a leader has identified problems, and assuming that President Cyril Ramaphosa has indeed been doing what he promised to do right at the beginning of his administration, after signing, performance agreements with the members of his executive, he said everyone will be held to account. By now, he would know or should know who is and who isn't performing, and should be able then to use this opportunity to deal with those questions as well, and knowing fully well, or having at least learnt, from previous administrations, that it's not easy to do a reshuffle. So the one opportunity you may have, even if it comes accidentally, you should be able to use it fully.
Absolutely, Pravuyo. That's why at the time that the announcement was made about the signing of those performance agreements, I said the ultimate test will be whether they are put to good use, and there's a review of performance that is undertaken in order to determine whether or not people retain their leadership positions in the cabinet. The reality of the matter is that, as Prof. Ndlejana was saying earlier on, there's a lot of considerations, but the majority of, or the weight of considerations that get made are more party political and the dynamics of power bases within the ANC than they do the state and the need to run a capable state. For that reason, it is going to be difficult to judge whether President, in fact, part of what I'm looking for is the extent to which President Cyril Ramaphosa in this reshuffle is going to feel free enough to demonstrate that it's not just the idea of dealing with scandal as well as a glaring non-performance that has forced his hand here, but also there is what you are talking about, a review of performance and allocation of people in positions. If it fails, if he fails to do that, we must understand that the same inwardly looking ANC is still an inhibiting factor on creating a capable state in South Africa at the level of the political executive.
Professor Ndlejana, is he freer or not now, or is he freer today to make tougher decisions than perhaps would have been the case when he started after at the 2019 elections?
Well, I'm not sure if it's free. He's certainly forced. He's certainly forced to make changes because of the incompetence of some of his ministers. The freeness of it, Vuyo, has to do with selecting from a wide range of people, even unpredictable people, but competent people nonetheless. See, the thing about, as I was saying earlier about reshuffles, we get all excited about them, but at the end of the day, they are just, there's nothing exciting really, because you get the same kind of people being recycled. And so the freeness for me would be taking people who are entirely competent, not your normal, usual suspect, people beyond your political consideration, where merit is the primary consideration for me. And by the way, this is not just about cabinet ministers, but it's about the president's own handling of cabinet. This thing that we've just had, the looting, and then you have ministers who don't know what they're supposed to do, who are not sharing information among themselves. And all these ministers serve in the same committee that is chaired by the president. So this is not just an indictment on the individual ministers, but on the president himself. He chairs the committee. He must make sure that people share the information, and he must follow up. Right? So you don't only have to get competent people, but you have to get the president who is in charge, who tells people what to do, who follows up. There's got to be a clear indication of where the center lies here. That's part of the problem. And it may well be that it's an institutional problem, that there isn't a monitoring body, like your old PICAS, Presidential Policy Unit of sorts. It may well be that, but the idea really that I need to underline is that you don't have it's not just about individual incompetence, but it is about the leadership of the president in commanding the entire cabinet. After all, these ministers are doing what the president instructs them to do. If they don't do what they are meant to do, if we get surprised that things are not done, it means that the president himself is not monitoring. There is something that is not doing. So the center, there's something about the center here that needs to be fixed.
So I'm glad you're raising that, because, we know that we're talking about a president here who is often gets surprised, in fact shocked, at things that people see every day, and that are, most of them out there, in the public, things that every South African, more so, a president should know about. And as you have just said, it could well be that these people had gotten so used, to, being or not doing their jobs, that this time around they were caught because of the, the kind of problem that they had to deal with. But this is something that they had been doing, all along. But if then the center itself is not holding, as you are suggesting, Prof. I know, this often gets said about one of the soccer coaches, whether he should sack himself instead of sacking, whenever his team performs very, 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 very badly. It's unlikely that the president is going to reshuffle himself or say the problem starts with me and therefore leaving. What would give South Africans the confidence that from now on things are going to change, and if at any point a finger is pointing at him, then he'll be the first to then bite the bullet as well?
Well, he obviously won't resign. But the thing about this president is that part of the reason why I support him, and most people do, is because he was the best within a terrible field in the ANC. And he promised something quite different, whereas his opponents were going to perpetuate mediocrity and corruption. And so we preferred him because the field was a little bit thin. And now what he needs to do is to validate our faith in him, show us that he deserved the presidency. He was not just there, but the reason why he is president is because he happened to be there. And we thought, okay, let's put him in because he's better than the rest. But not so much because he has demonstrated competence. And now what we need to do, and this is third year in his presidency, And it's getting tired. It's getting a little bit irritating that we have to wait for the president to act doing the obvious things. This is a country that is in a crisis for you, all sorts of problems. And what everybody is yearning for is decisiveness and courage, leading from the front. But what this president has continued to do is to wait for noise, for problems to come up. Then he shows up, right, emboldened by the public outcry. He doesn't lead from the front. And this country is in a serious problems, deep problems, to have a president who follows the noise, who's not leading from the front. So one hopes that you will get some indication here, especially with the appointments, that you are going beyond your ordinary, predictable pool to bring in people who change things around. In that way, that it shows that he's willing to take the initiative instead of following because it's safe. He prefers it to be safe, then he goes, but it does not lead from the front. And in a situation like where we are now in this country, you don't need a president who follows the flock, who waits for the crowd. He needs to lead because the problems are just immense.
Well, if you've just joined us, we're building up to that announcement by President Cyril Ramaphosa, which we will be bringing to you live from the Union buildings. It is about a cabinet reshuffle. The presidency's statement said as much, and we're expecting the president to walk in any minute now. But for now, we continue with the conversation, and my guests are Professor Mcebisi as well as Ongama Mtimka. Ongama, one of the things that people have said about the president is that it's not because he doesn't know what needs to be done. It's just that he rarely musters the courage to act on whether it's his instinct or what other people who have an interest in him doing the right thing actually ask him to do. Now, you've said previously, now part of the problem is the political system, and in particular the ANC church, within which he has to operate. At what point do you think the president will be able to say that, because, I mean, let's face it here, we're talking about the president who doesn't have to think about where his next meal will come from. And from that, people have deduced that he actually can, unlike his predecessors, actually take one for the nation, go for the jugular, you know, and if it doesn't work or they want to throw him out, and so be it. He's not going to sleep in the streets. Your thoughts?
Indeed, Bravoya. So if you look throughout history, it's always the case that those that come in at times to deal with a hopeless and a crisis situation, they then have to actually lead a revolution which is a counter the current. And as a result of that, you attract rebellion by design as a matter of as a direct consequence of the task that you take. So what then leaders do is they choose between either remaining and giving into the inhibiting political environment they find themselves in, and therefore write their names in history as lame duck presidents or leaders, or they calculate the risks and act with courage and boldness to do what history dictates. And when they do so, you're quite right, they do not rely on things like, for example, self-preservation, but rather on the greater rewards of the agenda, which is greater than even the organization that may have been a vehicle for them to get in there. So you're quite right. He needs to take one for the country, and he's run out of time in order to be able to do that. And I think so much so that whatever reform agenda is now being pursued is only good in terms of reversing some of the negative things that have been done, but the greater work of renewal of South Africa is going to happen despite the ANC, despite President Cyril Ramaphosa, because he's gotten to a stage where now the momentum of self-destruction has gotten of the party has reached so much a point of no return that regardless of what they do, he won't salvage the party. So why not act in the best interest of the country so that your era gets remembered as the great renewal, whose commitment was more to the country than was to the individual organization, or in fact, even the individual, President Cyril Ramaphosa.
Your take, Prof, are we being flippant when we say, here's someone who can take one for the nation, given what he has been able to do as a businessman over the past, decade or two?
Well, he can do that for you. I think the general consensus now is that there aren't any credible challengers to his presidency. He's secured. And now he just needs to act. And from the very beginning, and that's why the ANC had him, is that he was electable. He was their savior. He gave them credibility at the time when they were in a mess and all that. And he has proven to be an electoral asset to them. So there is no need for tentativeness, for timidity, because the ANC is firmly behind him. All his detractors are suspended, in prison, and might be in prison. So he's in charge, right? So there's no need now to worry about alienating certain people. All he needs to do is to act. And that's the kind of courage I am hoping that he will discover somewhere and do that, especially because, you see, if you want to be he's always wanted to be president. You don't yearn for the presidency for so many years only to be pedestrian, to be ordinary. And being president is a significant thing. You want to leave a legacy. You don't want to steer the ship. But you want to leave something that is a representation of your distinction as a president. And this president actually has history agrees with him. He's come in at a moment when we needed a new leader.
But then, But then, I mean, just picking up on that point of a credible challenger. I mean, arguably, Thabo Mbeki was more credible than a Jacob Zuma, but that didn't stop those who threw their weight behind Jacob Zuma, from getting what they wanted in Polokwane. So other people call it the balance of forces. Because remember, I mean, the group, that started paving the way, to Polokwane attacks was a disparate group, and they knew that the person they were going to put forward as a candidate was compromised. But that didn't stop them from putting that candidate forward. Not only putting the candidate forward, but getting that candidate to win. So is it about the credibility of challengers? What if there is a realignment of forces? Because people are talking about that now in the case of Dr. Zweli Mkhize.
Well, it would be interesting to see who they choose as a potential challenger. But part of the problem, or part of the issue...
we're going to stop. I'm going to stop you right there. The president is on the podium, and he is about to speak. Let's take a listen.
Good evening, fellow South Africans. This evening, I'm announcing certain changes to the national executive of our country. This comes at a time when the country is facing several challenges, and we are called upon to undertake several tasks all at once. Firstly, we are working to accelerate our vaccination program to overcome the COVID-19 pandemic. Secondly, we are working to ensure that there is peace and stability in our country in the wake of the recent outbreak of violence and destruction in parts of the country. And thirdly, we are mobilizing all available resources and capabilities to rebuild our economy and provide relief to the most vulnerable. I'm therefore making changes to the National Executive to improve the capacity of government so that it is able to effectively undertake these tasks. At the same time, there are a number of vacancies that need to be filled. These vacancies created by the tragic passing of Minister Jackson Mthembu and Deputy Minister Velile Hlongwa, and the appointment of former Minister Pax Tau as MEC in Gauteng. A further vacancy has arisen following the request I have received from Minister Zwelini Mkhize to allow him to step down as the Minister of Health in order to bring certainty and stability to the health portfolio. I'm grateful to Minister Mkhize for his service to our country, and particularly for the outstanding leadership he has provided in the face of the worst pandemic in over a century in our country. I have also accepted a long-standing request by Minister Tito Mboweni to be excused from his position as Minister of Finance. Minister Mboweni took up this position following the sudden departure of former Minister Nhlanhla Nene in October 2018. Since then, he has effectively and ably steered National Treasury through extremely difficult economic times, providing leadership and instilling confidence. I'm grateful to Minister Mboweni for responding to the call I made to him to serve our nation at its time of great need. I had prevailed on him to stay on, even as he wanted to leave earlier. And today, I've acceded to his request to leave. And we wish him well in his endeavors, and I'm sure that he will continue to excel and also be available for certain tasks that he may be given from time to serve our people. We're making certain changes to the configuration of government departments and ministries. The first of these is to separate the Ministry of Human Settlements from the Ministry of Water and Sanitation. At the beginning of this administration, we had brought these two portfolios together on the understanding that the provision of water is closely tied to the development of human settlements. However, the reality is that water is a far broader issue, impacting not only on human settlements, but also on agriculture, industry, mining, and environmental management. Water is our country's most critical natural resource. Water security is fundamental to the lives and health of our people, to the stability of our society, and to the growth and sustainability of our economy. We've therefore decided that water and sanitation should be a separate ministry, which will enable a dedicated focus on ensuring that all South Africans have access to a secure and sustainable supply of this precious resource. The second change we are making is to do away with the Ministry of State Security and place political responsibility for the state security agency in the presidency. And this is also done by a number of other governments around the world. This is to ensure that the country's domestic and foreign intelligence services more effectively enable the president to exercise his responsibility to safeguard the security and integrity of the nation. With respect to ministers, I am making the following new appointments. In the presidency, we'll be appointing Mr. Mondli Ngugubele, Communications and Digital Technologies, Ms. Kumbuzo Nchabeni, Defense and Military Veterans, Ms. Thandi Mudise, Finance, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, Health, Mr. Joe Patla, Human Settlements, Ms. Mamuluku Kubai, Public Service and Administration, Ms. Ayanda Dlodlo, Small Business and Development, Minister Stella Ndabeni Abrahams, Tourism, Ms. Lindiwe Sisulu, Water and Sanitation, Mr. Senzo Mkhulu. Minister Nosiviwe Mapisa Ngakula will be deployed to a new position, and we'd like to thank her for her service to the nation and dedication for her responsibilities. With respect to deputy ministers, I'm making the following appointments. In the presidency, we'll have Ms. Pinky Kekana, who will come in as the second deputy minister. In Agriculture, Rural Development and Land Reform, Ms. Zoleka Kapa. In Communications and Digital Technologies, Mr. Phili Mapulane. Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, Ms. Tembing Kadimeng. Health, Dr. Sibongiseni Dlomo. Mineral Resources and Energy, Dr. Nobuhle Nkabani. Public Service and Administration, Dr. Chana Pilane Majake. Small Business Development, Mr. Sdumo Dlamini. Transport, Ms. Sindisiwe Chikunga. Water and Sanitation, Ms. Dikeledi Makadzi, who will also be working there with Deputy Minister Mahlobo. Mr. Zizi Kodwa is appointed as Deputy Minister in the Presidency responsible for state security. My fellow South Africans, 3 weeks have passed since the country experienced an orchestrated campaign of public violence, destruction, and sabotage. I wish to once again commend the brave actions of our security forces on the ground, who were faced with a difficult situation and exercised commendable restraint to prevent any loss of life or further escalation. While calm has restored to the affected areas and our law enforcement agencies are working hard to bring those responsible to justice, we have acknowledged that our security services were found wanting in several respects. As part of the critical measures we are undertaking to strengthen our security services and to prevent a recurrence of these events, I'm appointing an expert panel to lead a thorough and critical review of our preparedness and the shortcomings in our response. Members of the panel are Professor Sandy Africa, who will chair this panel, Advocate Mujanku Gumbi, and Mr. Sulumko Sokuba. The panel will examine all aspects of our security response and will make recommendations on strengthening our capabilities. To improve support to the President and the National Security Council in the strategic management of the country's security, I'm appointing Dr. Sidney Mufamadi as National Security Advisor. This position has been vacant since Mr. Charles Ngakula stepped down earlier this year. I did write to him and thanked him for his service. I wish to express my deep appreciation to all outgoing ministers and deputy ministers for their service to government and to the people of South Africa. The task of rebuilding our economy and our society requires urgent action and focus. It requires cooperation amongst all sectors of society and the active involvement of all South Africans. As this administration, as this collective, we are unwavering in our determination to build a capable state, one which is ably led and which effectively serves the needs of the people of our country. I thank you.
Big announcements from the president there, and in a short while we're going to get you reactions from political parties, but also analysis from some of our political analysts. Well, let's bring in our first guest. Now, Asanda Nwasheng, who is a political analyst. Asanda, you heard what the president just announced. Your takeaways?
I think it's interesting to see the people that he's decided to bring back. I'm glad that a lot of the ministers that he has removed are on the list. The people within the security cluster who have been removed did deserve to be removed. I've been talking about how they failed us at a moment where we needed them the most. I'm very happy that Tito Mboweni is gone. He really was not interested in the welfare of South Africa. If you look at his Twitter feed and how he used to be so appraising so much other countries and not so much his own country that he was in charge of the purse of. And so I really am glad about a lot of the new appointments, but I'm concerned that some of the people that he's bringing back are people who are scandal-filled, like Enoch Godongwana, who left the Eastern Cape under a cloud of corruption charges, then left the last ministry he was in with allegations of having, been in a corruption scandal where 100 million rands of clothing workers' pension funds were misused, were misspent, and so much more. And as I'm reading through the list, I'm seeing more and more people with old corruption scandals, which just kind of reminds us that the ANC is really almost unable to find corruption-free people. And so while there are new names and there are names who have not shown us their level and ability of corruption, there are too many old names that are coming up who we still don't know what happened to the cases that they were facing when they actually had to exit left. And so we're seeing the ANC do what it does best, which is just to shift people into the background when there's heat on them and then bring them back when they think we've forgotten. And I think this calls for South Africans to have the memory of an elephant and to be able to remember every single politician and the crimes that, they have never been cleared of. And it's going to be interesting to watch how the ANC is going to navigate as we start digging up the scandals that the various ministers that they've now brought in were facing at the time that they had to leave in the first place.
Okay, I'm going to, in the few minutes that I have, ask you, for us briefly to go through a few names and few issues here. State security, that ministry no longer exists. It's all now going to be the responsibility of the president. So meaning the former minister of state security moved to another portfolio. The minister of defense also moved to be given another task. What's interesting is that Bheki Cele stays. And not only that, the president had some good things to say right at the end about how the police and people who were on the ground conducted themselves. What do you read into that?
It makes no sense to me that Bheki Cele was retained, but what I suspect is that politically he couldn't get rid of all Zuma people, and so he had to make some compromises. And I think it's sad that of all the compromises that he would have had to make, Bheki Cele happens to be the person that is continuing to stay. Because we know Bheki Cele, of course, beyond what he has done and his refusal to, to arrest Jacob Zuma, there's still the corruption charges that he has never actually been cleared of. And so one of my concerns really is the ANC's inability to just find new people who are corruption-free and continue to just rehash these tired and old and corrupt and problematic people. But I think it's good that he's moved the state security into the presidency. It makes sense because the state security cluster, we know, has been used by successive presidents for their own nefarious means. And so in any case, it was always in the presidency, even though it seemed to be a separate unit. We know it was never independent.
Okay, another interesting one for me, both the minister and deputy minister of communication moved to different areas of the government's work. And this on the back of a comment that the former finance minister, now Tito Mboweni, made on this show only a week ago, that the whole spectrum issue has actually been problematic for more than 10 years now. And boom, today the president decides to put in new people in charge of that portfolio.
Yeah, Stella Ndabeni leaving communications was no surprise. I'm surprised she was even retained. And sadly for small business, she's now going to go and ruin small business. I think that, we know about the digitization issue of the SABC, which has never happened, even though a lot of money was given away by government for it to happen. We have issues when we are sitting as a country in an era where more than ever our digital capability is being tested because of COVID and everybody having to work from home. And what we're finding is that people in townships particularly are unable to work from home in the same ways that people in the suburb, for example, are able to work from home because government has not put in the necessary infrastructure to make sure that it's easy to get Wi-Fi, to make sure that it's easy to get the necessary network to be able to work from home. And so our government has continued to, implement policies that continue the legacy of apartheid and continue to create an even bigger digital divide between the haves and the have-nots. And so that is the failure and the legacy that Stella Ndabeni and her deputy leaves within the communications portfolio.
And that's where we're going to leave it, Asanda and I. Up next, you will, of course, have Peter Ndoro with more reaction, but also political analysis. Don't go away. Stay with SABC News.